Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. You're watching The Breaking Ground and I'm Deepthi Sachdeva. You're with us here on Times Now. Times Now, remember, has been tracking every bit of this big war between Israel and Iran. This, remember, is a significant escalation. For the very first time, you have Iran directly entering into the war. Till now, it was all through its proxies. And clearly, when you have Iran taking that step and you have that huge crisis right now in West Asia, what does this mean for the entire world is a story that we'll keep our focus on. We'll also be looking at, remember, a lot of other derivatives, getting in a lot of important other newsmakers as we'll see this entire story, and also bring to you images that define what really are we facing. And clearly, here in India, the one obvious question is, does this war affect us? Will this war affect us? Or can India right now just sit and watch and we can see how this entire issue will unfold? Before we look at those questions, I want you to look at these images that we begin this coverage with. These are defining images. Remember, we've picked up 5 videos for you. These are images that again and again will tell you what happened. It was just about in that moment. Again, this is dated October the 1st, late last night. For close to about 2 hours is where you see this constant bombardment happening. These, remember, are missiles. These little balls that you see right now, golden ones in the black sky, these are all missiles that get fired. This gets fired by Iran into Israel. And this is also a moment when you had an individual, a young boy, in fact, he was just sitting there and he realized that a missile falls there and it just blows up. Clearly, no one was aware what's going on. It took them a little while to understand the scale of this entire war and what has happened in the last many hours. This is a map to help you understand what we are talking about. Where is Israel? Where is the Gaza Strip? Where is Lebanon? Many say this is also a 7-front war that already has been opened right now. As Iran launched these missiles at Israel, we've seen a lot of world capitals now taking a position. They say terror cannot be tolerated. We have to look at, remember, our safety of our individuals. We'll keep, running more images for you. These are, again, all defining videos. Constant drum of explosion is what you saw and what you could hear. All this, remember, has been captured by people that went viral on the social media. Again, the moment when this missile really hits the ground, and this is when you saw that missile in the air. There is also an iron dome that Israel has, and that was able to repel a lot of these attacks, something that is very clear in a lot of these images that you see on your screens. We'll bring up the next video also now for you. All these are videos that have come to us and in our newsrooms. Very, very defining. This is the aftermath. Though we haven't seen a loss of life, but there has been some bit of devastation that has been still reported. Fires, there has been damage to some property. The Hezbollah earlier has also fired a barrage of these missiles. Remember, Hezbollah, again, is a terror group. The same terror group that some believe is only fighting for a humanitarian cause. But the same Hezbollah fires a barrage of these missiles. These are images coming in from northern Israel to us. So this tells you that this war is not just, ladies and gentlemen, limited to Iran and to Israel. There are a lot of other players. You will see most of the region around there in West Asia getting involved in this. Also images of Benjamin Netanyahu, who's famously called Bibi. Israel vowing that Iran will pay. He has continuously said that no amount of terror and no form of terror should be tolerated. And he said, we will avenge this. We will avenge this. We will also teach the perpetrators of terror a lesson, is what he has said. You've also earlier seen the Prime Minister speaking to him and again speaking of how terror is something that affects all of us as a country. Let's bring up our next video also now on your screens. This is about Israel sending more troops to Lebanon. Lebanon, again, remember, is again a part of this entire war front right now, where you've seen that, war also spiraling. Northern Israel border is where we've seen all these troops right now stationed. Multiple troops that are on standby right now. And clearly, you're seeing, like I said, a lot of world capitals finally taking a stand against terror. Let's bring up our top 5 questions at 5, as we will see them here on our screens right now. The first big question, which will just go up on your screens, The first and the most important question that anyone and every one of you has been asking, that what was the scale of the attack? How big was this? How many missiles were forward? And what really led to the attack in the first place? We'll tell you all that in just a moment. This brings us to our second question, that were these missiles stopped by the Iron Dome? I mentioned about the Iron Dome. It's a technology that Israel has to repel a lot of these missiles. So did that really help? If it did, to what extent? Again, we'll discuss this. This brings us to our third question now. How have Israel's allies reacted? One of the allies is the US. What has the US said and done so far? Is the US directly involved in this war? What has Joe Biden said? And have we seen American troops also participating in this war? And the critical question, what next? We've seen this attack, we've seen a lot of responses, but what happens next? Is an escalation now inevitable? How will Israel really respond? When will that response happen? And how severe could that response be? And this is a question that is very, very important for all of us here in India, that how will this war affect India? How will this affect our subcontinent? What happens to the oil prices? Because this, again, is a critical thing to look at. And the stock markets. This is, again, something that people have been talking about, that would this lead to a clear escalation? Will the oil prices jump? What happens to the Brent? What happens to the stock markets? All this is something that we'll keep our eyes focused on. As we look at these questions, let me also introduce our panel of guests joining us right now. We have Ambrish Baliga, who's a market expert on the show. We also have Shah Rubinstein, the head of the Emerging Technologies Mind at Israel. And also we have Professor Madhav Nalapat, the Vice Chair at the Manipal Advanced Research Group, joining us. Dr. Mehmet Selik, the Editorial Coordinator at Daily Sabah, also joining us on the show right now. Dr. Mehmet, let's begin by asking you, sir, when you have seen everything that has happened on the story so far, you've seen that escalation, the kind of responses, what do you think is the road ahead? What happens next?
Well, I think what happens next is a big question, and it's a big uncertainty, how the Israeli side will retaliate, whether they will retaliate or not. How will then, if that happens, Iran will retaliate, and where this war will take us is, I think, a big question that remains uncertain. And then the answer for it is, I think, is only known by those in Tel Aviv and those in Tehran. Now, I am saying that where this will lead us, I think one of the the easier side to answer is that it is not leading to us to a more peaceful world. Whether you're looking at this from Tel Aviv or from Tehran, this is not something that the other parties in the region are very happy with. And this is not just only limited to the region, but also globally. This is something that is affecting every citizen, distant in the distance or near to this heart of the conflict. But I think one thing that is very certain is that Israel's attacks on Gaza, and it has been labeled as a genocide, and the casualties and the loss of lives, women and children being killed, that is something that is certain, that needs to be also shed light to, in addition to Iran's retaliation. The fact that Israel has also have been an attempt to invade Lebanon, neighboring Lebanon, is also something that needs to be questioned. In face of this confrontation, we should also realize that this is not a problem that began on October 7. Israel's occupation in the occupied territories is not something new. It's decades long, and despite the international community's pressure, despite the UN's calls, I mean, today Israel designated Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of United Nations, as persona non grata. This is something that I think also we should discuss and highlight. Israel, no one should minimize the effects of this escalation, and it should not be only confined to something between Iran and Israel only. The Israeli side and the Iranian side, they haven't really confronted against one another in a large scale. Mostly, I would call it a sham fight between the two that need each other in this region for their own existence. They pose one another as a threat, and they protect their own position accordingly. What happens when this is taking place? The civilians around them pay the price.
Further, before I get in Professor Madhav Nalapar also into this conversation, I want to take a little moment to talk to Shahar. Now, Shahar, when you look at the entire sequence of events, a lot of people are asking that what really prompted Iran to jump into this war by itself? Because for the longest time, we do know Iran and its proxies were leading this war. But this time, Iran is coming to the fore. It is an equal participant right now. It's an equal aggressor in this war. Why did that happen?
Well, I think we can revert to April and see the attack that Iran coordinated over Israel, again with ballistic missiles, with drones, and with cruise missiles over Israel. It wasn't unprovoked, but it was an unprecedented attack by a UN member on another UN member with ballistic missiles, I think for the first time since the Second World War. I want to revert back to Dr. Mahmet's remarks, talking about the genocide, so-called genocide in Gaza, and designating the UN Secretary General as a persona non grata in Israel. I think all these actions by the axis of resistance, by Iran, by its proxies, led Israel to act as it did. And now I think Iran and the axis is feeling the brunt of it, and is trying to regain power, regain deterrence, regain control, and show its proxies that it's still in support of them. And that's why we saw what we saw yesterday. And I felt what I felt yesterday when I went down to the bomb shelter with my 1-month-old baby and wife. I think this aggression is unprecedented, and I think that Israel said that it will retaliate. Retaliation will mean a lot of things, not necessarily world economic repercussions, but still very, very interesting developments there.
Yes, why don't you shed a little bit more light and talk about the experience, just last night, like you just mentioned, that the sirens go off, you go into a bunker with your 1-year-old child. Is this pretty normal? I mean, because for us, this again reeks of, being in a system that is unequal. There are people who are scared, people who do not know what happens the next moment. Now, Israel clearly not just has the Iron Dome, but they also have a lot of these security bunkers. They have the sirens. So can you just talk through what went through you and, the entire family over the last few hours then?
It's something that unfortunately we're quite familiar with. We're unfamiliar with this kind of attack, but familiar with missiles raining down on our cities, unfortunately. Fortunately, Israel does have a fourfold missile protection system that uses the Iron Dome, the Magic Wand, or David Sling, as you call it, and the Arrow system that is more for ballistic missiles, and also an Air Force that intercepts some of these rockets. Some of these rockets do land, and some of these rockets do kill, and usually they kill civilians. And these civilians didn't do nothing to deserve it. And as you said, my personal experience, it was for the first time I was in a bomb shelter with my 1-month-old, baby. Before then, I wasn't really scared, you can say, but when you have this kind of responsibility, then it becomes real, and it was scary, and it was nerve-wracking, and it went on for over 2 hours. We were down there in you can't really call it a bunker. Most Israelis don't have bunkers. This is a common myth. Most Israelis just go down to their a few flights of stairs and hope for the best. This is what we did with our neighbors. It was frightening. It was scary. Well, it shouldn't happen. And I hope it won't happen again. But unfortunately, it seems like we're going on an escalatory stage of this conflict.
Yes, and Sir, more power to you. You know, I think as humanity, as individuals, we all stand with you, you know, in this very, very difficult hour. We've seen, you know, India making a lot of right noises. We've seen the Prime Minister reaching out to Benjamin Netanyahu, also saying that terror is something that has affected everyone. And that is the reason why we as a world need to be taking a strong stand. Now, let's also look at how this issue that right now continues between Israel and Iran could affect us here in India. On your screen, remember, ladies and gentlemen, are images, again, that are terrifying, images that are worrying, but images that are real. This will tell us, you know, Amrish ji, also of the fact that though we are miles apart, but a crisis there near the Red Sea, you know, when it comes to trade, when it comes to oil prices, could also affect us. Now, how do you see this immediate crisis right now? How will you see this affecting us in the long run?
Absolutely, because see, I mean, we live in a connected world. So whenever there's a geopolitical issue, markets really react negatively because there can be an economic disruption. There can be major political changes. And more importantly, it can, and it'll surely affect lives. But then, I mean, typically, whenever such sort of escalation happens, the markets react negatively. But then when it's confirmed that it's more or less localized, then the markets bounce back because it is not in your backyard. So because of which the markets bounce back. I mean, we have seen that happening for Russia, Ukraine. Initially, the markets fell, but then when we knew that it was more localized and I mean, other countries are not getting into that same war, then the markets bounced back. Then we had you had Israel-Palestine when it started initially. We thought it can escalate in that region, but then again the same story repeated. But now what's happening? I think there is a very clear fear that it can escalate, and if this escalates, like I said, it can like affect the supply chains across. I mean, we have seen that happening during COVID, and we have seen the effect on the economy. Oil prices would move up because normally whenever there's a war, oil prices do move up, and that will add to inflation. And I mean, a number of Indian companies are today multinationals. I mean, having businesses across the globe. So surely, I mean, most of them would get affected if the escalation happens. So I think it's right now, it's time to wait and watch. But yes, I mean, if you ask me as to what can happen to the markets tomorrow, clearly, I think the markets will take some sort of a decent correction. And I mean, like in case we hear of more escalation, yes, you can see the markets going down further.
Yes,
Because,
and we must say, Amrishi, that a lot of those flights, the routes are also affected. And, you know, we at Times Now, remember, are continuously putting out a lot of information that concerns you, as in us here in India. What are things that we need to keep in mind? And also as humanity, as you've heard, you know, most of our speakers talking of the fact that it's important now that we as a world take a stand against terror. Now, Professor Madhav Nalapar, as I get you into this conversation now, why is that so difficult? You know, many would say that India itself is a fence sitter right now. India says it stands with Israel, but India also says that look for an opportunity where you can have a dialogue, where you can talk to someone and ensure that there is no aggression.
Deepti, may I point out that whether it is Hamas, whether it is Hezbollah, whether it is the mullahs in Iran, and let's not forget, the Iranian government is not controlled by its president, Mr. Pezeshkian, the elected president. It is controlled by the mullahs, who have no election at all. I mean, certainly none involving the people. And you've seen multiple situations in Iran in which the people have been quite upset about that. Now, the point of the matter is, Israel did not deny the right of Hamas or Hezbollah or even the mullahs in Iran to exist. It is they who unilaterally said Israel has no right to exist. And if you look at some of the writings and some of the speeches, and I'm sure all of us here will have access to them, and those who, you know, who speak Arabic will have even better access to them. They are very clear. The Jewish people, I mean, I don't want to describe what they describe the Jewish people as, but it's not very complimentary. And they should be, frankly, I mean, eliminated. Now, Deepthi, frankly, I mean, this is a pretty stark kind of an outlook on life.
Yes.
And there was no question that, and the kind of the weapons they use are weapons of terrorism. Now, what happened on October 7? What happened on October 7? Who were the soldiers who were caught? Who were the security personnel who were caught? Maybe one or two, but they were all innocent civilians going there for a party and having a good time. Now, you look at the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. They are such responsible players. None of them say that Israel has no right to exist. In fact, some of them have signed an Abraham Accord with Israel. They're highly responsible global players. And the fact of the matter is that when you say a country has no right to exist, when you say that the huge majority of the population of a country has no right to even live or survive, then what do you expect that country to do? I mean, I frankly, I find it bewildering that so many people are unable to grasp the essential fact that it is not Israel who declared that Hamas, and in fact, Israel has a problem.
You are right.
Israel ignored Hamas for too long, if I may say so. And Israel, but you're talking about Israeli occupation of the West Bank. Yes, I think that is a problem. But they never occupied Gaza. They left Gaza in 2005. They left Lebanon around the same time. There's no Israeli soldier there at all. So what occupation are we talking about? So I want to say, Deepthi, the cause of this conflict is this. And may I say, Iran has walked into Netanyahu's trap. Netanyahu was baiting Iran with Hezbollah, cutting it to pieces. Hamas, cutting it to pieces. And now they're going after the Houthis and waiting for the big prize, which is Iran. And Iran has walked into that trap. Why? Because there is no way 1 month from an election that Joe Biden can be anything other than extremely strong on Iran. Because the Trump's attack on him is that he has sold out Israel to Iran. And may I say, I don't think too many governments in that area are going to be very unhappy if the mullahs suffer.
I
am for
think,
the
again,
Iranian people.
yes.
I love them. They're wonderful people, but they should be they should not be controlled by a bunch of clerics and a bunch of mullahs who believe that Israel has no right to exist.
Only for what of time, yes.
Israel
does have a right to exist. And I think, like Professor Saab said, there are so many layers to this story. So we are at Times Now. Remember, viewers, this is a promise. We'll uncover every layer for you with the best experts, the most defining voices as promised, and the most stark images that bring to us the reality of this entire crisis. Only for what of time. Gentlemen, thank you so much for speaking to us. We head into a quick break. On the other side, there's lots more coming up.